A 5-year-old girl breaks free from a bustling restaurant kitchen, sprinting toward the most intimidating billionaire in the city. Before the frantic waitress can stop her, the little girl wraps her arms around the ruthless tycoon's leg and screams, "Daddy." The entire dining room freezes. But his reaction changes everything. The rain in Chicago was unforgiving that Tuesday morning, beating against the cracked window of Sarah Gallagher's cramped one-bedroom apartment. At 28, Sarah felt like she had already lived 3 lifetimes. The dark circles under her eyes were a permanent testament to the grueling double shifts, the unpaid bills stacked on her narrow kitchen counter, and the agonizing grief that still gripped her heart. 4 years ago, her husband Thomas had gone out to pick up a birthday cake for their daughter Mia's first birthday. He never came back. His car was found abandoned near the edge of Lake Michigan, the driver's side door hanging open, his wallet sitting on the passenger seat. The police dragged the waters for weeks, but no body was ever recovered. The official report suggested a tragic accident or a desperate suicide. But Sarah knew Thomas. He was a loving, devoted man, a mid-level accountant who spent his weekends building clumsy wooden toys for Mia. He wouldn't have just left them. But as the months turned into years, the life insurance company refused to pay out without a body, leaving Sarah drowning in the debt he had mysteriously accumulated in his final months. Now Sarah's entire world was reduced to keeping a roof over Mia's head. She worked as a senior server at the Belmont Room, a Michelin-starred establishment downtown that catered to the city's elite politicians, tech magnates, and old money heirs. The tips were the only thing keeping them from eviction, but the management was notoriously ruthless. The floor manager, David Carmichael, was a strict, unforgiving man who fired staff for a scuffed shoe or a misplaced fork. He had explicitly warned Sarah that her personal life was to never, under any circumstances, cross the threshold of his dining room. But at 6 a.m. on that torrential Tuesday, Sarah's carefully balanced house of cards collapsed. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Martha, the elderly neighbor, who usually watched Mia for a heavily discounted rate. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." Martha's voice was strained, laced with pain. "I slipped in the bathroom. My son is taking me to the emergency room. I think my hip is broken. I can't take Mia today." Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Sarah's veins. "Martha, oh my God, are you okay? Don't worry about us, just get to the hospital." She hung up and stared at the ceiling, her chest tight. She had exactly $42 in her checking account until payday. She couldn't afford a drop-in daycare center, and she had already used her final sick day 2 months ago when Mia had the flu. Missing her shift today meant automatic termination. Carmichael had made that perfectly clear the last time she was 5 minutes late. She looked over at Mia, who was curled up in her bed, clutching a faded photograph of a smiling man she barely remembered. Thomas. Mia carried that picture everywhere. She had his bright, intelligent green eyes and his unruly dark hair. "Okay, baby," Sarah whispered, brushing a curl from Mia's forehead. "We're going on a secret mission today." By 10:30 a.m., Sarah was sneaking Mia through the underground loading dock of the Belmont Room. Mia was bundled in an oversized yellow raincoat, her little hand gripping Sarah's tightly. Sarah's heart pounded violently against her ribs. If Carmichael caught her, it was over. She hurried Mia into the employee locker room, a windowless, cramped space smelling of industrial bleach and starch. It was rarely used during the lunch rush, as all staff were required to be on the floor. Sarah set up a makeshift camp in the corner behind a row of metal lockers. She laid out a soft blanket, a coloring book, a box of crayons, and an old iPad loaded with downloaded cartoons. "Mia, look at me," Sarah said, crouching down to eye level. Her voice was trembling, but she tried to project calm. Mommy has to work just outside that door. You are my special secret agent today. But a good secret agent has to be completely invisible. You cannot leave this room. You cannot make a sound. If you need me, you wait right here, and I will come check on you every time I take a break. Do you promise? Mia, possessing an understanding far beyond her 5 years, nodded solemnly. I promise, Mommy. I'll color the whole book. Wah, good girl. Sarah kissed her forehead, a pang of immense guilt washing over her. No child should be hidden in a dark closet. But she had no choice. She locked her purse in her locker, tied her crisp white apron around her waist, smoothed her hair into a flawless bun, and pushed through the swinging doors into the chaotic heat of the kitchen, praying it would be a quiet afternoon. But the Belmont room was never quiet. The lunch rush hit like a tidal wave. Sarah was immediately thrust into a whirlwind of searing pans, barking chefs, and demanding patrons. She carried heavy silver trays loaded with Wagyu beef tartar and butter-poached lobster, her feet aching, her mind constantly drifting back to the locker room. Every 15 minutes, she managed to slip back, cracking the door just enough to see Mia happily coloring, bathed in the dim glow of the iPad screen. For the first 2 hours, the plan worked flawlessly. Sarah was breathing a sigh of relief, thinking they might actually survive the day. But then, at 1:15 p.m., the atmosphere in the restaurant abruptly shifted. The chaotic hum of the dining room suddenly dropped to a hushed, nervous murmur. David Carmichael, usually pacing the floor with a scowl, practically sprinted toward the mahogany double doors at the front of the restaurant, his face pale and shining with sweat. Sarah, carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes, paused near the waiter's station. "What's going on?" she whispered to her co-worker, a young man named Leo. "It's Alexander Caldwell." Leo hissed his eyes wide. "He just walked in without a reservation. Carmichael is having a meltdown." Sarah felt a chill. Alexander Caldwell was a name whispered with a mix of reverence and fear in Chicago. He was the CEO of Caldwell Holdings, a massive venture capital firm that bought and liquidated companies with ruthless efficiency. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and known for his explosive temper and icy demeanor. He was the kind of man who could destroy a business or a restaurant's reputation with a single phone call. Sarah watched as a tall, broad-shouldered man in a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit strode into the room, flanked by 2 stone-faced security guards. He moved with a predatory grace, an aura of absolute authority radiating from him. He kept his head slightly bowed, speaking in low tones to an associate beside him. "Gallagher!" Carmichael hissed, appearing suddenly at Sarah's elbow. His fingers dug painfully into her arm. "Caldwell is at table 4. My best server called out today, so you are taking him. Flawless service, Sarah. I mean it. If his water glass drops below half full, if his steak is a degree over medium rare, you will never work in this city again. Go." Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes, Mr. Carmichael." She smoothed her apron, her hands trembling slightly, and walked toward the center of the room. Table 4 was the best seat in the house, a secluded circular booth bathed in the soft light of a crystal chandelier. As Sarah approached, Caldwell was still looking down, reading a document on his phone. His dark hair was impeccably styled, shot through with silver at the temples. "Good afternoon, Mr. Caldwell. Welcome to the Belmont room." Sarah said, her voice steady, trained to perfection. "My name is Sarah, and it will be my pleasure to take care of you today. May I start you with some sparkling water, or perhaps a vintage selection from our cellar?" Alexander Caldwell sighed a sound of sheer annoyance and slowly looked up from his phone. When his eyes met hers, the breath was knocked violently from Sarah's lungs. The silver tray in her hands rattled against the table. Her blood ran ice cold, and the bustling sounds of the restaurant faded into a high-pitched ringing in her ears. It was Thomas. Older, harsher, the lines around his eyes, deeper, the jawline sharper. But it was him. It was the exact same striking green eyes, the faint crescent-shaped scar on the left side of his chin, the one Thomas had gotten from falling off a bicycle when he was 10. Sarah stood, paralyzed, her mouth slightly open, unable to form a word. 1,000 impossible thoughts slammed into her brain. He's dead! He drowned! He's Thomas! Why is he in a custom suit? Why is he Alexander Caldwell? Is there a problem? Caldwell's voice was deep, resonant, and entirely stripped of warmth. It was Thomas's voice, but entirely devoid of the laughter she remembered. He looked at her with blank, impatient irritation. There was absolutely zero recognition in his eyes. He was looking at her the way one looks at a broken piece of furniture. Sarah stammered, feeling the edges of her vision darken. I asked you a question, Caldwell said smoothly, leaning back in his leather chair. Are you unwell or simply incompetent? Bring me a Macallan, 25, neat, and the venison. Now. Oh. Yes, sir, Sarah managed to choke out. She turned on her heel and practically fled toward the bar, her mind fracturing. She hid behind the espresso machine, gripping the steel counter to stop herself from collapsing. It's a coincidence, she told herself frantically, her chest heaving. It has to be. Doppelgangers exist. Thomas was a poor accountant who loved cheap beer and baseball. This man is a billionaire tyrant. It's just an insane, cruel trick of the universe. She forced herself to breathe. She had a daughter to feed. She could not lose her mind right now. She poured the Macallan with shaking hands and placed it on a tray. Just survive the shift, she chanted inwardly. Just survive the shift. She composed herself, pasting on a rigid professional smile, and carried the drink back to table 4. She approached from behind him, keeping her eyes averted, terrified of looking at his face again. But as she reached the table, she didn't notice the swinging doors of the kitchen slowly inching open. Mia had finished her coloring book. She was thirsty, and the water bottle Sarah had left her was empty. Deciding to be brave, Mia had crept out of the locker room, intending to just peek into the kitchen to find her mother. But the chaotic maze of chefs had terrified her, and she had slipped right past the prep station, pushing through the heavy leather doors and stumbling directly out onto the immaculate main floor of the Belmont room. She stood there in her bright yellow raincoat, a glaring anomaly amidst the sea of black tuxedos and evening gowns. Carmichael, standing near the host stand, spotted her. His face contorted in absolute horror. "Whose child is that?" he hissed to a busboy stepping forward to intercept her. But Mia wasn't looking at Carmichael. Her wide, innocent eyes were scanning the room for her mother. Instead, her gaze locked onto the man sitting in the center booth. Table 4. He had turned his head slightly to speak to his guard. The profile, the dark hair, the green eyes. To a 5-year-old girl who had spent every night staring at a photograph on her nightstand, there was no doubt in the world. "Daddy." Mia's voice was a high, joyous shriek that cut through the low hum of the restaurant like a siren. Before Carmichael could grab her, before Sarah could even turn her head, Mia was running. Her little sneakers slapped against the polished hardwood floor. She slipped past a waiter, ducked under the arm of a startled patron, and barreled straight toward table 4. Sarah spun around just in time to see the yellow raincoat flying across the room. "Mia, no!" Sarah screamed, all professionalism completely evaporating. But it was too late. Mia threw herself at Alexander Caldwell, wrapping her small, desperate arms around his incredibly expensive tailored leg, burying her face into his knee. "Daddy, you came back. Mommy said you were lost, but you came back." Mia cried, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. The entire restaurant plunged into a dead, horrifying silence. Forks stopped mid-air. Waiters froze. Carmichael looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Sarah rushed forward, her heart exploding in her chest. She grabbed Mia by the shoulders, trying to pry her off. "I am so sorry, sir. She's confused. I am so sorry." But Alexander Caldwell didn't immediately kick the child away. For 3 agonizing seconds he froze. His hands resting on the table gripped the heavy white tablecloth so tightly his knuckles turned stark white. He looked down at the little girl clinging to him, and then slowly his eyes drifted up to meet Sarah's. For a fraction of a second, the icy, dead stare of the billionaire vanished. Behind those green eyes, something shattered. It was a look of profound, agonizing recognition. It was a look of absolute terror. "He knows me," Sarah realized with a sickening jolt that nearly brought her to her knees. "He knows exactly who I am. He is Thomas." But just as quickly as the emotion appeared, the heavy steel vault of Alexander Caldwell slammed shut. His face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. He roughly pulled his leg back, dislodging Mia so sharply she stumbled backward and fell hard onto the floor. Mia let out a startled, heart-breaking wail. "Security!" Caldwell barked, his voice echoing loudly in the silent room. He didn't even look at Mia, who was crying on the floor. He glared directly at Sarah, his eyes devoid of any humanity. "Get this psychotic woman and her filthy child out of my establishment, now!" Sarah fell to her knees, pulling sobbing Mia to her chest. She looked up at the man who had once promised to love her forever, the man who had vanished into thin air, leaving her to starve. "Thomas," Sarah whispered, a sound so broken and quiet only he could hear it. Caldwell leaned forward, his face inches from hers. His scent, expensive cologne, mixed with the faint, metallic smell of fear, washed over her. "My name is Alexander Caldwell." He hissed, his voice trembling with a dark, terrifying rage. "And if you ever come near me again, I will make sure you and this bastard child disappear permanently. Throw them out." 2 massive hands clamped down on Sarah's shoulders, dragging her backward as the restaurant erupted into chaos. The heavy brass doors of the Belmont room slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the torrential Chicago downpour. Sarah hit the wet pavement of the alleyway, hard shielding Mia with her own body, as the 2 security guards tossed them out like garbage. David Carmichael stood in the doorway, his face purple with outrage. "You are fired, Gallagher. Don't even think about coming back for your final paycheck. You'll be hearing from the restaurant's lawyers." He spun around and disappeared inside, locking the deadbolt. Sarah sat in the freezing rain, her crisp white apron soaked in dirty puddle water, clutching her sobbing daughter. Mia was trembling violently, burying her face into Sarah's neck. "Mummy!" Mia hiccuped, her voice shattered. "Why was Daddy so mean? Why didn't he want me?" The question tore through Sarah's chest like jagged glass. She didn't have an answer. The man inside was a monster. He looked like Thomas, sounded like Thomas, but he possessed the soul of a predator. "I'm so sorry, baby," Sarah wept, kissing Mia's wet hair. "That wasn't Daddy. It was just a man who looked like him. Daddy would never hurt you. I promise." She forced herself to stand, her knees bruised and aching. They had nothing. No job, no money, and now the crushing realization that the ghost of her husband was a billionaire tyrant who despised their very existence. Sarah began to walk toward the bus stop, desperate to get Mia into dry clothes. Suddenly the roar of an engine cut through the rhythmic drumming of the rain. A sleek, bulletproof black SUV rounded the corner of the alley and screeched to a halt, blocking their path. Sarah's blood ran cold. She instinctively pushed Mia behind her, looking around for a weapon, her eyes darting to a discarded glass bottle near a dumpster. The driver's side door opened. A towering man in a dark trench coat stepped out. It was one of the security guards from the restaurant, the one who had been standing next to Alexander Caldwell's table. "Stay away from us!" Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "I'll call the police." The man held up both hands in a gesture of surrender. His face was entirely unreadable, chiseled from stone. "Mrs. Gallagher, my name is Harrison. I am not here to hurt you. Please, you need to get into the vehicle." "Are you insane?" Sarah spat, gripping Mia's hand tighter. "Your boss just threw my child onto the floor. I'm not going anywhere with you." Harrison glanced nervously down the alleyway, as if checking for watchers. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully. You and Mia are in grave danger." The man sitting across from Mr. Caldwell at table 4 was Jonathan Croft, the chief enforcer for the Caldwell family's board of directors. Croft is a butcher. If Alexander had shown even an ounce of affection toward your daughter in that restaurant, Croft would have had you both killed before midnight to secure the company's inheritance. Sarah froze the rain, pasting her hair to her cheeks. Her mind struggled to process the sheer absurdity of his words. "What are you talking about? He's an accountant. His name is Thomas." Harrison sighed heavily, reaching into his coat pocket. Sarah flinched, but he only pulled out a small, cheap burner phone. He held it out to her. "Take it," Harrison urged. "He wants to explain everything. But we have less than 3 minutes before Croft's men track my vehicle's GPS. Please." Trembling, Sarah took the phone. The screen was already lit up with an active call. She slowly brought the device to her ear. "Hello," she whispered. "Sarah." The voice on the other end was breathless, raw, and completely stripped of the icy billionaire facade. It was the warm, desperately loving voice that used to whisper in the dark of their tiny apartment. It was Thomas. "Thomas!" Sarah gasped, her knees nearly giving out. "Sarah, oh God, Sarah, I am so sorry." The voice cracked heavy with restrained tears. "Did he hurt her? Is Mia okay? Tell me she's okay." "She's terrified," Sarah cried, anger finally bubbling up through the shock. "You threw her on the floor. You looked at us like we were vermin. How could you? I had to—" Thomas pleaded. His voice panicked. "Sarah, you have to listen to me. I don't have much time. 5 years ago, my uncle orchestrated a hit on me to take control of Caldwell Holdings. I survived, but the trauma wiped my memory. I woke up with nothing, wandered into the city, and built a life with you. I loved you, Sarah. I loved our life. I was Thomas." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, hot tears mixing with the freezing rain. 4 years ago. Thomas continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "My uncle's men finally tracked me down by the lake. They ambushed me. They dragged me back into this hell. The physical shock of the attack brought my old memories back. But my uncle held me hostage. He told me that if I ever tried to contact you or Mia, he would slaughter you both. I have spent 4 years playing the role of the ruthless CEO, secretly dismantling his criminal empire from the inside, waiting for the day I could destroy him and come home." Sarah couldn't breathe. The abandoned car, the missing body, the horrific, crushing grief she had endured for 4 years. It was all a cage designed to protect her. Today, when Mia ran up to me, Thomas's voice broke entirely, a sob tearing through the line. It was the greatest and most terrifying moment of my life. Croft was sitting right there. He suspects I'm trying to overthrow them. If he saw that I cared about you, you would be dead right now. I had to look at my own daughter and treat her like dirt to save her life. Sarah, I am so sorry. It took everything I had not to pull her into my arms and kill everyone in that room. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice dropping to a fierce, determined whisper. The waitress was gone. The survivor had taken over. If her husband was fighting a war for their family, she wasn't going to be a casualty. "Harrison is my most trusted man," Thomas said quickly. "He has a bag in the SUV with $2 million in untraceable cash-forged passports and a private jet waiting at O'Hare. I am transferring the entire Caldwell fortune into a blind trust in Mia's name tonight. Once the money is gone, my uncle has no power. I am turning the evidence of his crimes over to the FBI in exactly 1 hour." "Thomas, they'll kill you," Sarah panicked, clutching the phone. "They're going to try," Thomas said, a dark, grim resolve in his tone. "But I have nothing left to lose except the two of you. Go with Harrison. Hide. When the news breaks that the Caldwell Empire has fallen, I will find you. Tell Mia. Tell Mia her daddy loves her more than life itself." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone for a fraction of a second before throwing it into the storm drain. She grabbed Mia, practically throwing her into the warm leather interior of the armored SUV before diving in after her. "Drive!" Sarah ordered Harrison, her eyes flashing with a terrifying protective fire. The next 6 months were a blur of foreign cities, secure compounds, and agonizing silence. Sarah and Mia relocated to a secluded villa on the coast of New Zealand, living under assumed names. Sarah watched the international news religiously. 3 days after the incident at the Belmont Room, the headlines exploded. Caldwell Holdings raided by FBI. CEO Alexander Caldwell missing. Board members arrested on racketeering charges. The days turned into weeks, then months. Sarah built a quiet routine homeschooling Mia by the ocean, teaching her how to swim and trying desperately to keep hope alive. But every night she stared at the door, wondering if the man who walked through it would be Alexander the billionaire, or Thomas, her husband, or if he would ever walk through it at all. On a warm Tuesday evening, exactly 6 months to the day of the restaurant incident, Sarah was in the kitchen slicing apples. Mia was playing on the rug in the living room, building a wooden block tower. Suddenly, the heavy oak front door groaned open. Sarah dropped the knife. It clattered against the tile floor. She sprinted into the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the golden sunset, was a man. He wasn't wearing a bespoke charcoal suit. He was wearing faded jeans, a simple grey t-shirt and worn-out boots. He looked tired, bruised, and incredibly thin. But his green eyes were bright, shining with unshed tears. Mia dropped her wooden block. She stared at the man for a long, quiet moment. Then a massive, radiant smile broke across her face. She didn't hesitate this time. She didn't ask for permission. She ran across the floor, launching herself into the air. Thomas caught her, burying his face in her neck as he collapsed to his knees, right there in the entryway, sobbing uncontrollably. He held his daughter so tightly it looked as though he was trying to fuse them back together. "I'm here, baby," Thomas cried, his voice muffled by her hair. "Daddy's here. I'm never leaving again. The bad men are gone." Sarah walked slowly down the hall, tears streaming down her face, her hand covering her mouth. Thomas looked up at her, still clutching Mia. He reached out his free hand, his fingers trembling. "Are we safe?" Sarah whispered, falling to her knees beside them. "We're safe." Thomas swore, pulling Sarah into the embrace. The three of them held on to each other on the floor of the villa, a tangled mess of tears and profound, overwhelming relief. The Empire is gone. Alexander Caldwell is dead. It's just Thomas now. Just us. Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady, strong heartbeat she thought she had lost forever. The rain in Chicago felt like a lifetime ago. They had walked through hell, but finally they were home. What a heart-stopping journey of a mother's fierce love and a father's ultimate sacrifice. Thomas risked everything to protect his family from the shadows of his billionaire past. If you were captivated by this intense story of survival hidden identities and a family's miraculous reunion, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life dramas every week.